Ambassador Jin Ho stepped into the massive crystalline chamber, his footsteps echoing against the translucent walls that stretched up into darkness. The Galactic Council's meeting hall was designed to intimidate, towering spires of alien architecture that made any visitor feel small and insignificant. Hundreds of different species filled the curved seating arrangements, their eyes, sensors, and various optical organs all focused on the lone human standing in the center. High Chancellor Vortax rose from his throne-like seat, his scaled form, casting long shadows across the chamber floor. The reptilian being was nearly 3 meters tall, with crimson eyes that glowed like burning coals and razor-sharp teeth that gleamed when he spoke. His species, the Drakmori, had ruled the outer, rim territories for over 2,000 years through fear and overwhelming military might. Human representative, Vortax's voice boomed through the chamber's advanced acoustic system, each word dripping with contempt. Your pathetic species has been expanding across star systems without proper authorization from this council. You build colonies, establish trade routes, and spread your influence like some kind of cosmic plague. Jin Ho remained perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back. He had trained for this moment for months, studying every species in the council, learning their languages, their customs, their weaknesses. The diplomatic corps had chosen him specifically for his ability to remain calm under pressure. Around the chamber, other council members shifted in their seats. The blue-skinned Axirians whispered among themselves through their telepathic link. The insectoid Vorthak clicked their mandibles in what passed for agreement. The energy beings, known as the Luxari, pulsed with brighter light, their excitement feeding off the tension in the room. Furthermore, Vortax continued, his claws scraping against the metallic podium, your species has been interfering with established trade agreements. The mining rights to the Kepler sector belong to council-approved corporations, yet human ships appear there daily, extracting resources that are not yours to take. The accusations weren't entirely false. Humanity had indeed been aggressive in their expansion since developing faster-than-light travel just 50 years ago. What had started as a handful of colony ships had grown into a network of over 200 human settlements scattered across dozens of star systems. Earth's population had grown tired of living on a single world, and the discovery of habitable planets had sparked the greatest migration in human history. The Council has decided, Vortax's voice grew louder, that your species requires proper guidance. You will pay tribute of 1 million tons of rare minerals annually. Iridium, platinum, and quantum crystals extracted from your mining operations will be delivered to Council stations. Additionally, all human military vessels will be equipped with Council-approved monitoring systems. Your expansion will proceed, only with our explicit permission. Murmurs of approval rippled through the assembled aliens. This was how the Council had always operated. Identify a rising species, force them into submission through economic pressure and military threats, then drain their resources for centuries. It was a system that had worked perfectly for millennia. Jin Ho finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite its relatively quiet tone. And if humanity refuses these terms, Vortax's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile on a human face, but on his reptilian features looked more like a predator bearing its fangs. Then your homeworld becomes space dust, human. We have 12 battle fleets positioned throughout your territory. Each one carries enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Your primitive weapons and outdated shields would last perhaps minutes against our technology. To emphasize his point, Vortax activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. 3-dimensional images showed massive alien warships, sleek Drakmori dreadnoughts bristling with plasma cannons, crystalline Axirian vessels that could phase through solid matter, and the living bioships of the Zephyrian Collective that could regenerate damage in real time. The display zoomed in on Earth's solar system, showing red markers indicating the positions of Council scout ships. More red dots appeared around human colonies, marking the locations where invasion fleets waited. In hyperspace, ready to emerge and begin bombardment at a moment's notice. Your largest warship carries maybe 200 crew members. Vortax laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Our smallest battlecruiser has a crew of 5,000. We have conquered species far more advanced than yours, human. The Corvani Empire lasted 3 days against us. The Stellar Federation surrendered after seeing what we did to their first colony world. Jinho studied the holographic display carefully, noting the positions of the Council fleets, their apparent numbers, and their strategic deployment. He had expected this. Earth's intelligence services had detected the alien ships weeks ago. What the Council didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this confrontation much longer than anyone suspected. I understand your position, Jinho said calmly. However, I must request 72 hours to consult with Earth's leadership before providing a formal response to your demands. The request sent waves of laughter rippling through the chamber. Alien voices created a cacophony of sounds, hissing, clicking, electronic buzzing and subsonic rumbles that made the crystalline walls vibrate. Some species had translation devices that converted their amusement into recognizable human laughter, while others expressed their mirth in ways that seemed almost impossible to biological creatures. Vortax's laughter was the loudest of all, his massive form shaking with amusement. 72 hours to decide whether your species lives or dies. How generous we are being, allowing you time to compose your surrender terms. What none of them realized was that Jinho's calm demeanor wasn't born from diplomatic training alone. Hidden in his jacket was a quantum communicator, already transmitting everything back to Earth. The 72 hours weren't for consultation, they were for preparation. And across human space, fleets that had been hiding in the dark spaces between stars were already beginning to move. The Council members continued laughing, completely unaware that they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. The quantum transmission array on Lunar Base crackled to life at exactly 14 knots Earth Standard Time. President Su Jin stood before the massive communication hub, her image being broadcast simultaneously to every human settlement across 47 star systems. Behind her, the blue marble of Earth hung in the viewport, a reminder of what they were all fighting to protect. Citizens of humanity, she began, her voice carrying the weight of their species' future. 72 hours ago, the Galactic Council delivered an ultimatum to our people. They demand we bow down, pay tribute, and accept their rule over human space. On the mining station orbiting Proxima Centauri, workers stopped their plasma cutters to listen. In the agricultural domes of New Sol Colony, farmers gathered around communication screens. Aboard the deep space exploration vessel Horizon, Captain Minho ordered all crew to the main deck. After careful consideration with our military leaders, our scientists and representatives from every human world, I have reached a decision. Su Jin's eyes hardened, reflecting the steel that had carried humanity from a single world to the stars. We reject the Council's demands entirely. The reaction was immediate. Across human space, crowds erupted in cheers. On New Busan Station, dock workers threw their caps in the air. Children in the underground cities of Titan pressed their faces against viewing ports, watching as defensive platforms that had been hidden for years suddenly powered up with brilliant blue light. Effective immediately, Su Jin continued, humanity withdraws from all galactic trade agreements. We will no longer export our resources to Council worlds. We will no longer honor their shipping contracts or recognize their territorial claims in human space. What the galaxy didn't know was that this moment had been planned for over a decade. When humanity first encountered alien species, Earth's leadership had learned a hard lesson from their own history. Peaceful contact was rare, and the strong often preyed upon the weak. While diplomats had been making friends and signing trade deals, Earth's military had been preparing for war. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, massive mining platforms suddenly revealed their true purpose. What the Council had assumed were simple ore extraction facilities began unfolding like mechanical flowers. Hidden weapon batteries emerged from camouflaged hulls. Railgun turrets that could accelerate projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed swiveled toward predetermined firing positions. Captain Dongwu stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching as his tactical display lit up with green signals. The ship itself was a masterpiece of human engineering, nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that had been designed using captured alien technology and improved with human innovation. What made it truly special wasn't its size or firepower, but the crew of 12,000 that represented every nation, every culture, every corner of human civilization. "Sir, receiving confirmation signals from all fleet elements," reported Lieutenant Hai Jin from her station. "Stealth networks are operational. All ships report ready status." Dongwu nodded grimly. "Signal all commands. Prepare for Phase 2. Across human space." The response was immediate and coordinated. Ships that had been pretending to be cargo haulers suddenly dropped their disguises, revealing military-grade hulls and weapon systems. Mining vessels deployed defensive drones that swarmed around colony worlds like protective insects. Even civilian transports began broadcasting new identification codes, marking them as part of humanity's reserve fleet. The Kepler Mining Consortium's facility had been one of the Council's main complaints. They claimed humans were stealing resources that belonged to alien corporations. What they didn't realize was that the facility had been designed as more than just a mining operation. Deep beneath the asteroid's surface, automated factories had been producing something far more valuable than rare minerals. They had been building weapons. Engineer Kyung-soo had spent 3 years overseeing the secret project, telling his workers they were constructing mining equipment. In reality, they had been assembling the components for humanity's new generation of warships. As President Soo-jin's broadcast ended, Kyung-soo activated the final sequence. The asteroid split open like an egg, revealing a massive shipyard hidden inside. Dozens of sleek human vessels emerged from the concealed facility, their hulls gleaming with adaptive armor that could shift its molecular structure to deflect different types of energy weapons. These weren't the crude, bulky ships that other species expected from a young civilization. These were precision instruments of war, designed by minds that had spent centuries perfecting the art of conflict on a single world before taking it to the stars. On the bridge of his command ship, Admiral Taemin watched as similar scenes played. Out across human territory, the Vega shipyards revealed their hidden construction bays. The research stations around Wolf 359 deployed experimental weapon platforms that used principles of physics most alien species hadn't even discovered yet. Even the agricultural worlds began launching their own surprises, civilian ships that transformed into missile platforms, orbital elevators that doubled as mass drivers capable of launching projectiles across star systems. The most impressive sight was around Earth itself, where Lunar Base had been quietly constructing what appeared to be a massive space elevator. As the President's broadcast concluded, the structure revealed its true nature. It wasn't a transportation system. It was the largest railgun ever built by human hands, capable of accelerating projectiles across interstellar distances with devastating accuracy. Meanwhile, in the outer rim territories, human exploration vessels that had been mapping uncharted systems for years activated protocols they had hoped never to use. Captain So Young aboard the scout ship, Pathfinder opened sealed orders that revealed the locations of hidden supply depots, emergency bases, and weapon caches scattered throughout unexplored space. Humanity had been preparing for this war before. They even knew they would have to fight it. The Council's intelligence networks immediately began picking up the massive surge in human military activity. On the Drakmori homeworld, Fleet Admiral Krixmon studied the reports with growing concern. What had appeared to be a simple subjugation of a primitive species was beginning to look like something far more complicated. "High Chancellor," he reported. To Vortax, "The humans are not responding as expected. Our scouts report massive military buildups across their territory. They appear to have been hiding their true capabilities." Vortax's response was predictable. "Impossible. We have studied their technology for years. They barely have interstellar flight capability. Whatever they are doing is merely desperate theatrics before their inevitable surrender." But deep in his scaled chest, something that might have been doubt began to grow. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council faced an opponent that wasn't begging for mercy. Instead, humanity was preparing for war. Fleet Commander Krixtal had conquered 17 star systems in his military career. Each victory had followed the same pattern: overwhelming force, superior technology, and the inevitable surrender of whatever species dared to challenge the Council's authority. As his massive dreadnought Void Serpent dropped out of hyperspace, at the edge of the Kepler system, he expected this engagement to last no more than a few hours. "All ships battle formation Delta 7, he commanded through his ship's communication array. Behind him, 43 Council warships materialized from the swirling energy of hyperspace, a mix of Drakmori heavy cruisers, Exerian phase ships, and the bioorganic vessels of the Zephyrian Collective. Each ship represented centuries of advanced alien engineering, weapons that could melt through planetary crust, and shields that had never been penetrated. "Target the mining facility first," Krixtal ordered, his four arms moving across different control panels simultaneously. "Once we destroy their primary resource extraction point, the other colonies will surrender without resistance." The tactical display showed what appeared to be a lightly defended system. A few human patrol ships, some defensive platforms around the main colony world, and the mining station that had caused so much trouble. Intelligence reports indicated primitive technology, chemical rockets, basic energy weapons and shields. That wouldn't stop a Council training vessel. "Sir, detecting unusual energy signatures from the mining facility," reported his sensor operator, a young Drakmori named Vexitar. "The readings don't match any known human technology," Krixtal dismissed, the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. "Probably some crude attempt at upgrading their defenses. Begin the attack." The Council fleet opened fire with a coordinated barrage that should have vaporized the mining station instantly. Plasma beams, quantum torpedoes, and disruptor pulses crossed the void at near light speed. The weapons had been tested against every known defensive technology in the galaxy. Then something impossible happened. The mining station didn't explode. Instead, a shimmering barrier appeared around it, absorbing the energy of the attack like water soaking into dry earth. But that wasn't the strangest part. The barrier was changing, shifting colors and density as each weapon struck it. "What? In the void?" Krixtal snarled, his red eyes widening in disbelief. "Sir, their shields are analyzing our weapons," Vextar reported, his voice trembling. "The barrier is adapting to each energy frequency we're using." Before Krixtal could respond, the mining station opened up like a mechanical flower. What had appeared to be a simple ore extraction facility revealed itself as something far more sophisticated. Weapon batteries emerged from hidden compartments, but these weren't the crude energy cannons they had expected. These were sleek, predatory-looking, devices that seemed to track the Council ships like living creatures. "Incoming projectiles," the tactical officer announced. "Impact in 30 seconds." The projectiles weren't missiles in any traditional sense. They were small, fast-moving objects that seemed to shift and change as they flew through space. When they struck the first Council ship, a Zephyrian biocruiser, the results were devastating. The organic hull that could regenerate from most. Damage began to dissolve as the human weapons delivered some kind of adaptive payload that prevented the ship's natural healing processes. "Impossible," Krixtal roared. "How do they know our ship's biological composition?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Throughout human space, advanced artificial intelligence systems had been quietly studying every piece of alien technology they could access. Trade agreements, diplomatic exchanges, and even captured debris from alien ship malfunctions had all been analyzed, reverse-engineered, and improved upon. What the Council saw as primitive human curiosity had actually been systematic intelligence gathering. Lieutenant Hai Jin stood at her command station aboard the human defense platform, New Horizon, watching as her adaptive combat systems processed incoming data faster than any biological mind could comprehend. The platform itself was a marvel of human engineering, part space station, part warship, and part research facility. Its hull was embedded with millions of microscopic sensors that could analyze any weapon that struck it and immediately begin developing countermeasures. "Sir, enemy formations are falling back," she reported to Commander Jinwook, her voice steady despite the chaos of battle erupting around them. "Our adaptive systems are 3 steps ahead of their targeting computers. The human defense network had been designed around a simple principle: learn from every attack and never make the same mistake twice. As Council weapons struck human ships and installations, quantum computers throughout the system processed the data, shared it instantly with all other human vessels, and began producing countermeasures. A Drakmori heavy cruiser fired its main plasma cannon at the human frigate, Soul's Pride. The plasma beam, hot enough to melt asteroids, struck the ship's shields and was absorbed completely. But the shield didn't just stop the attack, it analyzed the plasma's composition, temperature, and energy signature. Within seconds, every human ship in the system had updated its defensive systems to be immune to that specific type of plasma weapon. "This is impossible," Krixtal muttered as he watched his fleet's weapons become less and less effective with each passing minute. No species develops technology this quickly. What he didn't understand was that humanity hadn't developed this technology quickly. They had been preparing for this exact scenario for over a decade. Every piece of alien equipment they had encountered through trade or diplomacy had been secretly studied. Human scientists had spent years figuring out how Council weapons worked, how their ships were constructed, and most importantly, how to defeat them. The turning point came when a human vessel did something that no Council ship had ever seen before: the destroyer. Incheon began to change shape mid-battle, its hull flowing like liquid metal as it adapted to the enemy's attack patterns. Weapons that had been targeting its engines suddenly found empty space as the ship reconfigured itself. Armor that had been designed to stop energy weapons shifted to better defend against kinetic projectiles. "They're shapeshifters," Vextar whispered in horror, "like the ancient metamorphs from the Void Wars." But these weren't shapeshifters. They were machines guided by human ingenuity and artificial intelligence working in perfect harmony. Nanotechnology allowed the ship's hulls to reshape themselves in real time, while quantum computers calculated the most efficient configuration for any given combat situation. Captain Yu Jin piloted her fighter squadron through the chaos of battle, her small craft dancing between massive alien warships like insects around giants. But these insects had stings. Her squadron's weapons had been designed to exploit the specific weaknesses that human intelligence had identified in Council ship designs. Drakmori vessels had vulnerable power coupling nodes. Axirian ships could be disrupted by certain electromagnetic frequencies. Zephyrian bioships could be poisoned by tailored viral agents. "Dragon Squadron, target the command ship's communication array," she ordered. "Let's see how well they coordinate when they can't talk to each other." Her fighters swept in formation toward Krixtal's dreadnought, their weapons charging with energy that had been specifically tuned to disrupt Drakmori neural interfaces. The attack severed the ship's connection to the rest of the fleet, leaving 43 alien vessels suddenly unable to coordinate their movements. In the space of 2 hours, what should have been a simple punitive mission had become a complete disaster for the Council fleet. Ships that had never been damaged in centuries of warfare were limping away from human defensive positions. Weapons that had conquered dozens of species were being turned into technological curiosities by adaptive human systems. Krixtal stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Half his fleet was requesting permission to retreat. The other half was too damaged to continue fighting. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were learning from every exchange and becoming stronger with each passing moment. "All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance," he finally ordered, his pride crushed but his survival instincts intact. "Prepare a full tactical report for High Chancellor Vortax." As the Council fleet limped away from the Kepler system, humanity's defenders began the process of analyzing everything they had learned from the engagement. The adaptive systems that had saved them would be shared with every human vessel in known space within hours. The Council had just provided them with a complete education in advanced alien warfare tactics. They had no idea they had just made humanity's military exponentially more dangerous. General Tai Ho stood on the bridge of the massive human battleship Unified Dawn, watching the tactical display with quiet satisfaction. The Council's main battle fleet had finally arrived at the Sol system, bringing over 300 warships to crush humanity once and for all. High Chancellor Vortax himself commanded the invasion force aboard his flagship, a monstrous dreadnought called Galaxy's Fist that was larger than most space stations. "General, we're detecting hyperspace signatures," reported Communications Officer Mincio, her fingers dancing across the quantum array controls. Multiple jump points opening across the system. Vortax's voice boomed across all frequencies, filled with arrogant confidence. Humans of Earth, witness the might of the Galactic Council. Your pathetic resistance ends today. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Tejo activated his own transmission, his voice calm and steady. Chancellor Vortax, I believe you should look at your sensors more carefully before making threats. The first ships to emerge from hyperspace were sleek vessels with hulls that seemed to shimmer like water. The Nolari had arrived with their entire defense fleet, 47 ships that could phase in and out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to target. Their species had been dismissed by the Council as aquatic primitives because they lived in the deep oceans of their homeworld. What the Council had never bothered to learn was that the Nolari had developed technology that manipulated dimensional physics in ways that most species couldn't even comprehend. Nolari Captain Reefsinger sends greetings, Mincio translated through the Universal Communication Array. He says, and I quote, "The depths remember kindness, and today we swim in the void for our human friends." More hyperspace rifts opened, disgorging vessels that made Vortax's sensor operators gasp in disbelief. The Frexi arrived next, a species of crystalline beings that the Council had classified as non-sentient minerals. Their ships were living crystals that could split apart into thousands of smaller units or combine into massive formations. What made them truly terrifying was their ability to convert enemy weapons fire into raw energy that powered their own systems. Captain Crystalsong reports 31 vessels ready for combat, Mincio continued, a smile spreading across her face. The Frexi are asking permission to sing the song of battle alongside humanity. Vortax's confusion was evident in his transmitted response. What is this? How did you convince these inferior species to fight for you? Before Tejo could answer, another wave of ships emerged from hyperspace. The Veltans brought their biomechanical fleet, vessels that were part machine, part living organism. Their technology focused on rapid adaptation and regeneration, perfectly complementing humanity's adaptive defense systems. The Council had ignored them because their homeworld looked like a giant garden, assuming any species that lived in harmony with nature must be weak. "General," reported Tactical Officer Jae-hyun, "we're reading over 200 non-human vessels now, with more arriving every minute." The space around Earth was filling with ships from species that the Council had overlooked, dismissed, or actively oppressed for centuries. The insectoid Chakari brought swarm tactics that could overwhelm any defense. The energy beings known as the Luminari arrived in vessels made of pure light that could travel faster than any physical ship. Even the machine intelligence called the Nexus had sent automated dreadnoughts to fight alongside their human allies. "This is impossible," Vortax transmitted, his voice cracking with panic for the first time in his long military career. "These primitives cannot challenge the Council's authority. They lack the technology, the organization, the will to fight." Tejo's response was calm, almost gentle. "Chancellor, you're making the same mistake you've been making for centuries. You see strength only in conquest and submission. We didn't conquer these species. We befriended them. There's a difference." The truth was that humanity had spent decades building relationships throughout the galaxy. While the Council had been focused on their core territories and major trade routes, human explorers, scientists, and diplomats had been reaching out to species that everyone else ignored. They had shared technology freely, offered protection to those who needed it, and most importantly, they had listened. Captain So-min commanded the destroyer New Harmony, which had been specially designed for multi-species cooperation. Her crew included Nolari navigators, who could guide the ship through dimensional folds, Frexi engineers who could repair damage by singing to the ship's crystalline components, and Veltan biologists who had helped grow adaptive armor that could heal itself during battle. "General, receiving tactical data from all allied fleets," she reported. "The combined fleet is now over 500 vessels and growing." What made this alliance truly powerful wasn't just the numbers, it was the diversity. Each species brought unique capabilities that complemented the others perfectly. The Nolari could scout ahead using dimensional phase technology. The Frexi could provide unlimited energy by converting enemy attacks. The Veltans could repair and adapt any technology they encountered. Together, they created a military force. Unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, the Council fleet suddenly found itself outnumbered 3-1, facing technology they had never encountered and tactics they couldn't predict. Vortax's sensors showed ship designs from dozens of species, many of which Council databases had no information about because they had been deemed unworthy of study. All Council vessels attack formation Omega Prime, Vortax ordered desperately. Target the largest human ships first. But as the Council fleet moved to attack, something beautiful happened. The Allied vessels didn't just fight as separate fleets, they fought as one unified force. Nolari ships phased through space to appear behind Council formations. Frexy vessels absorbed the enemy's opening barrage and redirected the energy to power massive counterattacks. Veltan bioships adapted their hulls in real time to resist whatever weapons struck them. Lieutenant Haiwan monitored the battle from her station aboard the command ship, watching as decades of careful relationship building paid off in the most dramatic way possible. Sir Chakari swarm leaders are requesting permission to demonstrate the dance of 1,000 stings. The Luminari want to show Council forces the true meaning of light-speed combat. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. It wasn't just a military engagement, it was a demonstration of what was possible when different species worked together instead of trying to dominate each other. Council ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries found themselves outmaneuvered by insects, outgunned by crystals, and outsmarted by beings they had never bothered to understand. Admiral Crixmon, commanding the Council's left flank, watched in horror as his formation was systematically dismantled by a coordinated attack from 6 different species. "High Chancellor, we're taking massive casualties. Request permission to withdraw." But Vortax was too stunned to respond. His lifetime of assumptions about galactic politics was crumbling before his eyes. The primitive species he had dismissed were fighting with technology and tactics that made his own forces look outdated. Engineer Yuri worked frantically at her station, coordinating the technical integration between human and alien systems. "General, all Allied fleets report full compatibility with our command network. We're sharing targeting data, defensive protocols, and tactical analysis in real time across 17 different species." This was humanity's greatest achievement. Not just their military technology, but their ability to bring together the scattered, overlooked, and oppressed peoples of the galaxy into something greater than the sum of its parts. The Council had ruled through fear and division. Humanity had built something based on cooperation and mutual respect. As Council ships began retreating across multiple sectors, Vortax finally understood the magnitude of his miscalculation. He hadn't just underestimated humanity's military capabilities. He had completely failed to understand their greatest strength. They didn't conquer worlds, they made friends. And now those friends had come to help them change the galaxy forever. The Grand Assembly Hall on New Geneva Station buzzed with activity as representatives from over 300 species gathered for the historic moment. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Nolari dimensional technology had created spaces larger than should have been possible. Frexy crystal formations provided unlimited clean energy, and Veltan biomaterials had grown, the structure's living walls that could adapt to any environmental need. High Chancellor Vortax stood in the center of the circular chamber, his once proud form now bent with defeat. The massive reptilian being who had terrorized the galaxy for decades looked small and fragile, surrounded by the species he had oppressed. His crimson eyes, once burning with arrogance, now reflected only confusion and fear. President Sujin approached, the former dictator with measured steps, her presence commanding respect from every being in the chamber. Behind her walked representatives from the new Galactic Federation, not the handful of dominant species that had controlled the old council, but delegates from worlds that had never been allowed to speak before. Vortax of the Drakmori, Sujin's voice carried clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustic system. "You stand before this tribunal not as a conqueror, but as someone who has lost his way. Your empire is in ruins, Your fleet scattered, your authority broken. The fallen Chancellor's voice was barely a whisper. You have destroyed everything my people built over millennia. The order we maintained, the stability we provided to the galaxy. A gentle laugh rippled through the assembled delegates. Not mockery, but the sound of beings who had finally found freedom after centuries of oppression. Representative Reef Singer of the Nolari rose from his aquatic containment unit, his voice carrying the deep wisdom of the ocean depths. What you called order, we called imprisonment. What you called stability, we called stagnation. You prevented growth, exploration, and cooperation between species. President Sujin nodded respectfully to the Nolari delegate before addressing Vortax again. You ruled through fear, Chancellor. You made species afraid to innovate, afraid to explore, afraid to reach out to their neighbors. We offer something different. Partnership through respect. The transformation had begun even before the war ended. As Council fleets retreated from battle after battle, worlds that had been under their control for centuries began declaring independence. But instead of chaos, something beautiful emerged. The network of friendships that humanity had built became the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization. In the months following Vortax's capture, Ambassador Jin Ho had been elected as the first Secretary General of the Galactic Federation. He now stood at the observation deck of the Assembly Hall, watching as species that had never been allowed to meet each other discovered the joy of cooperation. Secretary General, called Engineer Min Jung as she approached with a data tablet. In her hands, the Chakari delegation wants to share their latest breakthrough in swarm-based construction techniques with the Luminari. They think combining insect coordination with energy manipulation could revolutionize space habitat design. Jinho smiled as he watched the insectoid Chakari clicking excitedly with beings made of pure light. 6 months ago, neither species had even known the other existed. The Council had kept them isolated, preventing the kind of cross-species innovation that was now happening everywhere. And the Frexi? Jinho asked, already knowing the answer would be positive. They're working with human engineers on something. They call singing ships, vessels that can repair themselves by harmonizing crystal resonance frequencies. Captain Eugene thinks we could have prototype testing within the year. The changes weren't just technological. The rigid caste system that had defined galactic society for millennia was crumbling. Species that had been classified as primitive or non-strategic were proving to have insights and capabilities that amazed everyone. The Veltan understanding of biological harmony had revolutionized medical science. The Nolari mastery of dimensional physics was opening new frontiers in faster-than-light travel. Most remarkable was what happened on former Council homeworlds. Instead of seeking revenge, the Federation offered reconciliation. Drakmori engineers, who had designed weapons of conquest, found themselves working alongside human scientists to develop terraforming technology. Axirian telepaths who had once spied on subject species now helped establish communication networks that allowed real-time translation between hundreds of different languages. Commander Taimin stood on the bridge of the Federation vessel, Unity's Dream, watching as the ship's mixed crew worked together with an efficiency that would have been impossible under the old system. His tactical officer was a reformed Drakmori warrior who had chosen cooperation over conquest. His navigator was a Nolari who could guide them through dimensional shortcuts that cut travel time by weeks. His chief engineer was actually a collective, intelligence. 3 Frexi crystals that harmonized their thoughts to solve complex problems. Commander, receiving requests from the Outer Rim territories, reported Communications Officer Young. 17 newly contacted species want to join the Federation. They're offering everything from advanced biotechnology to completely new approaches to artificial intelligence. This was the galaxy that humanity had dreamed of, not one where the strong dominated the weak, but where every species could contribute their unique gifts to something greater than themselves. Trade routes that had once carried tribute to Council, worlds now carried ideas, art, music, and innovations between hundreds of worlds. The tribunal continued as Vortax was forced to witness testimonies from species after species describing how Council rule had stifled their growth. But instead of demanding punishment, Most delegates spoke about forgiveness and the possibility of redemption. "The Drakmori people are not evil," testified Captain Crystal Song of the Frexy, her crystalline form pulsing with gentle light. "They were led by fear, just as we all were. The Federation offers them a chance to discover what they could become when they work with others, instead of ruling over them." Years passed, and the transformation continued. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization collapsed completely, replaced by a true cooperative where decisions were made by consensus and every species had an equal voice. Former council worlds that had hoarded technology for centuries began sharing their knowledge freely. The old trade routes became highways of cultural exchange. Human jazz music became popular on the crystalline worlds of the Frexy. Nolari poetry, with its deep ocean metaphors, inspired artists across dozens of species. Veltan gardening techniques were adapted to create beautiful spaces on space stations and starships throughout the galaxy. Jin Ho often reflected on how humanity's greatest contribution hadn't been their military victories or their adaptive technology. It had been their fundamental belief that every species, no matter how small or seemingly primitive, had something valuable to offer. This philosophy had built bridges between worlds that had been enemies for centuries. At the final session of Vortax's tribunal, President Su Jin made an offer that shocked the galaxy. Instead of imprisonment or exile, she proposed that the former chancellor serve as an advisor to help other authoritarian regimes transition to cooperative government. "Your knowledge of how oppression works makes you uniquely qualified to help. Others avoid those mistakes," she explained. "The galaxy needs healers now, not more prisoners." Vortax looked up at her with something approaching wonder. After a lifetime of believing that power came from domination, he was being offered a chance to find strength in service to others. It was a concept he barely understood, but one that offered hope for redemption. The assembly hall erupted in approval as delegates from hundreds of worlds voted to accept the proposal. The message was clear. The new galaxy would be built on second chances, cooperation, and the revolutionary idea that everyone deserved respect. As the session ended and beings from across the stars mingled in the corridors, Jin Ho watched with quiet satisfaction. Humanity had changed the galaxy not through conquest, but through friendship. They had proven that the greatest weapon any species could possess was the belief that every other species had value. The age of galactic tyranny was over. The age of cooperation had begun, the end.